What's good, guys? It's your boy Rio. Today, I should be saying konnichiwa because I'm in a Japanese car. That's right. First for the channel, I'm in a Lexus, and it's a 2017 Lexus NX200t. So this Lexus, while being a 2017 and while being the 200t, actually is about the exact same car you can get today when you get the NX300. In 2018, when they made the shift from the 200t to the 300, they changed a couple options, they changed a couple tiny things inside and out, and I'll tell you what those all are, but relatively speaking, it's the same power plant, it's basically the same car, so you can definitely apply this review towards a brand new or 2018 or 19 or 20 300. So the changes that they made when in 2018 they made that shift were you can get optional LED headlights with that typical Lexus triple L look. So you can get the LEDs, you can get the LEDs in the front. The spindle grille is slightly different. There's a double spindle that's a little thicker, so it's more pronounced. On the sides, there's a new fake plastic vent on the F Sport models, which this is as well, an F Sport model. So that makes it a little more aggressive, but I actually think it also makes it look a little cluttered. So that's 50-50, but it does make the front look even more aggressive. Then out rear, the inner and top part of the taillight, the part that's past the trunk line and within the trunk, is a little different and extends more towards the Lexus logo. Again, not a huge difference, but it is LED now in that little section where the reverse lights are. Down below, the exhausts are even more so incorporated into the diffuser. And lastly, inside, you get two big differences. One is a standard, even larger screen than this, and then an optional even larger screen than that. That's like almost 10.3 inches, I think. So it's massive and way larger than this screen. And coming along with that, you get a trackpad here instead of a scrolling knob. And we'll get to that later because I have a lot of feelings towards that. But relatively speaking, you're in about the exact same car in the 200T, which this is, or in a new 300. So I'm gonna give you guys my thoughts on this car. Now, I believe that this car is a tremendous value within the compact SUV segment for that $25,000 to $30,000 price range. Now, I gotta admit that would be a used one like this at that price range, because new, this car is roughly $37,000, and then the F Sport trim like this, it's $39,000. And for either of those, you'd have to pay an additional $1,500 to go from what this is, which is a front wheel drive, to then an all wheel drive. So this car as it sits is probably just a touch over $40,000, maybe at $42,000. Being an F Sport, but front wheel drive, and having leather, which is very nice looking, by the way, but also lacking a bunch of options like a sunroof, safety features like blind spot detection. There are little things like that you miss in this car, but even at $42,000 or so, it's not crazy expensive within the segment, being that it's a luxury make. One more thing I gotta tell you guys about is the powertrain. So this is a 2-liter 4-cylinder, turbocharged, and it makes 235 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque. Pretty comparable with the majority of the cars in this class. And speaking of its class, this car's competition tends to be cars like the BMW X3, the Audi Q5, the Mercedes GLC, the Acura MDX, and also on the lower end, but also the Tiguan, the RAV4, the CR-V, and the Mazda CX-5. Anyway, so let's take it for a drive and let's see how it drives and get some further thoughts. So as for me, I used to be a huge fanatic of German cars only. I used to preach, just get German cars, just get German cars. And I would always advise somebody getting Q5 over a car like this. But now that I've spent some time with this car in particular, I'm starting to realize that I may have been wrong. And part of the reason why I believe a car like this from a brand like Lexus is such a valuable car within the space is because you kind of have this nice intersect of affordability, reliability, and luxury. Now, refinement and performance are something that I think the Germans are always going to be better at, especially within the SUV market for now. They just make more refined, slightly more performance-oriented cars, and if that's what you want, I would stick with a German car, and especially now with the higher trim levels that are coming out in the sense of sportiness, there's an abundance. You can definitely find something you want from Porsche, BMW, Mercedes, and any of those makes. But getting back to this car, what I immediately notice is I feel like I'm in an exceptionally luxurious and comfortable RAV4. Now, I don't mean that as a diss. What I mean to say is you have all the practicality of a RAV4. Reliable, cheap to fix things, cheap to service, nothing too crazy. I mean, yeah, it has 18-inch wheels, but the tires are affordable. Everything that the package you're getting is an affordable package. Relatively speaking, it has good fuel economy. Everything makes sense. Everything is simple. You do have little things like the window switches and the mirror controls that feel a little cheap and more economy. But on top of what you get in a RAV4, here you get a stitched faux leather dash. You get obviously this F-Sport steering wheel. You get quite nicer looking seats, but also more nicely upholstered seats that are sportier and look more appealing. Then they have white contrast stitching, which looks pretty cool. You also get that Lexus look, the Lexus design language. Now, that's where things get a little iffy because some people can't stand Lexus design language, although I would admit that one of my favorite brands, BMW, has been copying a little bit of Lexus design language recently, so that might be a testament that Lexus is doing something right. Now, the grille and the fact that it kind of goes in and then out is something that a lot of people don't like. I was at first turned off by it years ago when I first began to see it on Lexus models. I think it looks better and works more on the SUVs in general. And I think on this particular car, for its size and sportiness and almost coupey, small coupe-like SUV nature, and the fact that this is an F-Sport and the fact that this is a black car, it looks really cool. It has, blacked out accents outside, everything, all the chrome is blacked out, and the grille also looks pretty cool. You get that aggressive Lexus look nonetheless outside. And even though there are little moments and little signs where this does feel a little cheaper and a little more economy and budget than it does luxurious, and while, again, you might get into a German car and go, wow, well, this is more refined inside and out, I think it makes up for it with the reliability and even the price. And the fact that these actually tend to hold their value better than some of the German counterparts, which, again, as much as I love those cars, they tend to tank in regards to value and depreciation. So some of those little areas where this car maybe doesn't stand out as much next to a German car, the taillights, for instance, they use really basic amber and halogen lights where you don't get that same level of quality you might find in an Audi Q5, for instance, with LEDs and sequential turn signals and some of the stuff. And by the way, I have a Q5 review that I'll link above. Not a car that I loved, actually, so you can definitely check that out and compare it to this since it is one of this car's competitors. Yeah, the speaker system isn't the best, but that's kind of what you should be used to with most of these cars in this range, and if you get the base system, it's all right. The upgraded Mark Levinson, I'm sure, would be a huge improvement. In this car, however, I would say the base system is probably more than fine unless you really need a fantastic audio system. But let's take a quick break and let's do the tall boy test, and then we'll come back to the car. Now, I do want to talk about a couple things that kind of make me want to jump out of a Lexus and not ever buy one. And there's some of the little finicky Lexus things, like not having any digital time or clock in this car. There's an analog clock here, which is cool and very romantic, and it's definitely antiquated, but it's a romantic little touch. It's just that there should also be digital time. There could be one on the screen here. There's plenty of space to be for there to be one in the cluster. So the fact that it's missing, it's a little frustrating. Then I gotta talk about all the knobs in this car. So you have a knob, a dial, if you will. You have a dial for the volume, makes sense. You have a dial to tune, makes sense. Then you also have a dial for the drive modes, which you have Eco, Normal, and Sport. Now, I think this car mostly should be driven in Normal. You can pretty quickly throw it into Sport by twisting it, but it's just another knob, another dial. Then there's a controller for the center screen, another dial, another knob, So it becomes a little annoying when you have 4 or 5 knobs that are the main things you're interacting with in this car. There are some other buttons to accompany them, but it's just a little bit frustrating. However, the second that I sat inside of a new NX300, I realized that I appreciate all these knobs or these dials, because in the 300 with the newer screen, and it can be a bit bigger and it's a bit nicer and a better UI overall. However, you get the trackpad, the godforsaken trackpad in that car instead of this knob, and suddenly this knob seems great and I'm more than happy with it, and I'd much rather have it than have that trackpad that's terrible, awful, and it's the worst decision ever made by a car manufacturer regarding infotainment system. Instead of touchscreen, instead of just a normal controller, they put a trackpad, and it works horribly, and the UI sucks, even though it's better than this technically. Now, the UI in this car is not the best, but once again, I think what makes this car better, and if you do go ahead and check out my Q5 review that I've done, what you'll see is you're not going to get a ton in a base Q5 or a base X3 or a base Mercedes GLC, the German competitors of this car. If you are comparing this car to the Germans, or if you're coming over from one of the Germans, you're going to pay less and in some cases get more. Now again, if you want the most ultimate refinement, you're never going to find it in this, but what you're going to find is this little Lexus charm. Things like the fact that there's a hidden compartment here with a mirror on the back of it. So, I mean, it's just little things you got to get used to, and if you appreciate them, then, you know, Lexus is meant for you. I would ultimately suggest anybody who's interested in this car, go and test drive it. But I think that this is a better value than going and buying a brand new base Toyota RAV4. At $25,000 for a base one, and at nearly $40,000 for a fully loaded one, a more base Lexus NX200t used is a way better value proposition. You're getting a faux leather stitch dash, you're getting the steering wheel that looks sweet, you're getting the exterior styling, you're getting the Lexus brand. You're ultimately buying a luxury car. People appreciate Lexuses because they're reliable, they're luxurious, and they're very comfortable. These seats are super comfortable. The rear seat legroom is plentiful. The trunk's pretty big. Again, this is a compact SUV. One of the little things I didn't like about it is the rear visibility out of the rear window isn't great. The mirrors on the sides, however, are delightfully large, and they kind of make up for it, but it is a little frustrating to not be able to see as much as you're expecting out of an SUV out of the rear. Because of all of that, it becomes a really nice little car. Once again, you miss the sunroof, you miss the digital time, you miss other little refinements like LED taillights, especially if you get the 200T, but, big but, you sometimes miss some of those exact things with some of the Germans, depending on options, and often at a higher price, you still miss a bunch of that stuff. And sure enough, with money, you can get everything you want, and I think if you're into performance, go ahead and get those mid to higher level performance variants of an X3 or an GLC, but because many people are not interested in that and they want luxury, they want a little bit of comfort, and they also want a little bit of a brand, you know, a little bit of appearance, and not gonna say panache, but it's a Lexus. When you show up in a Lexus, you're driving a very nice car without being ostentatious or gaudy in any way. So it's a really nice medium, it's reliable, and they hold their value well. So I would say if you're interested, test drive one, but I can't believe it's gotten as much of a stamp of approval from me as it has. And even the front wheel drive component, while there is a little torque steer, only if you're really pushing it, which I don't think most people will be pushing this car. The wheelbase is a little short. I think it's actually almost 8 or 9 inches shorter than the new 3 Series wheelbase. And you do notice that over some bumps, expansion joints, and some undulations where the car vibrates a little bit more and isn't quite as smooth as you'd expect. I'm gonna start ending my videos with something I'm gonna call a vibe check. And when it comes to the vibe, this car, it's pretty vibey. I was surprised, and I would say it passes the vibe check a little bit. I think most people would be hard pressed to find a huge amount of flaws in this car. I think digital clock is high on my list of flaws. But lastly, I would again suggest, especially if you're unfamiliar with Lexuses, go test drive one. They have little things that make them Lexuses. They have their own feel and style. So see how you feel about it, see if you like it. But nonetheless, this is your boy Rio. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and tune back in for more.